slides to talk you through, which I hope will frame the Bank of England's interest in climate change. You might think it a bit of a surprise for the Bank of England to be talking about some of these issues, but actually it's at the heart of what we do. Climate scientists have been clear for many years now that the levels of carbon in our atmosphere are unprecedented, that global average temperatures are increasing and sea levels are continuing to rise. What we have also been clear about at the Bank of England, though, is that climate change is not just an issue for governments and the environment, but it's one that has significant financial consequences that arise from the physical impacts of climate change, whether they're hurricanes, floods, or droughts, but also the transition to a zero carbon economy. Climate change, therefore, matters for our objectives as a central bank of safety and soundness of financial firms and the stability of the financial system more broadly. But we've been clear, in addition, that these financial risks from climate change are distinctive and they require a different approach if we are to manage them effectively. First, these risks are far-reaching in their breadth and in their scope. They will affect all customers, all geographies, all industries. Their impact will be correlated, the effects will be non-linear. Together, that means that these challenges, these risks are likely to occur on a much greater scale than other types of risks. Secondly, these risks are eminently foreseeable. I can't tell you now exactly what will happen and when, a bit like I couldn't tell you what happens with the B word, but what I can say, as this chart of possible carbon pathways highlights, with a high degree of certainty that we will face some risk. Either we carry on our current trajectory of carbon emissions and we will see the physical effects of climate change, or we start to change that trajectory of carbon emissions, and in which case we see the transition risks. In all states of the world, we need to address risk, we just don't know which one. And then third, and for us at the Bank of England, this is the most important, the size of those future risks depends on the actions that we take today. If we are to minimize our future financial risks, we need an early and an orderly transition. And again, as this chart highlights, if we want that early, orderly and transition, we need to bend the carbon curve now. If we wait for the risks to materialize, it will be too late for us to act. Now, let me be clear, it's the real economy that needs to act, that needs to change. But the financial system, as Susan and others have already outlined, has got a core role to play in accelerating that change. As I said, the financial risk from climate change will be minimized in an early and orderly transition. And through the decisions on where and how to allocate capital, the financial system can pull forward such a transition so that financial institutions are ahead of and in control of the transition, directing capital to those firms that are resilient to the transition and avoiding investing in those that are not. One final point, again an important one from our perspective, this need to transition to a zero carbon economy is an economy-wide transition. It affects transport, it affects real estate, it affects agriculture, it affects infrastructure. It is not just the energy sector. And speaking personally, therefore, I can't see that we'll be able to disinvest our way to a zero carbon economy. It's a much bigger challenge than that. So, what have we done at the Bank of England in response to these challenges? First, we've raised awareness of these issues. Governor Carney first spoke about them in 2015, got himself into trouble for pushing the boundaries of central banking as he did so. But now there is a recognition that these issues bring financial risks. Second, we have surveyed the banks and insurers that we supervise to judge how good a job they are doing in managing this risk. Thirdly, and reflecting the fact that in that survey we found that only 10% of the firms we surveyed were taking a strategic approach to managing this risk, we became the first regulator in the world to issue supervisory expectations that are designed to deliver a comprehensive, forward-looking, strategic approach to managing these risks from the firms that we supervise. The aim is for there to be a board-level discussion considering how decisions today can be changed in respect of the future financial risks that they create. And then fourth, recognizing that approaches to managing these risks are immature, and so we need to support the development of best practice. We've established the Climate Financial Risk Forum to share experience and build capacity. But there's much more to do too. Firstly, we're planning to work with firms to enhance, indeed try and transform their approach to managing these risks by identifying best practice and embedding that in our supervisory requirements. Secondly, disclosure is critical if the financial system is to be able to weigh risks and direct its investments in the right way. We have therefore been clear that we expect listed firms and major investors to disclose in line with the international standards set out by the FSB's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures by 2022. Third, we have said that we will undertake a stress test of the UK financial system to help us better size this risk. This is a complex exercise, so we'll be consulting on how to go about doing that later this autumn. And I hope that our approach that we described there will be valuable not just to the banks and the insurers that we directly supervise, but to the financial system more broadly. And then finally, we're leading the way with our own actions, including through disclosing our own approach to managing risks in line with the TCFD in our next annual report. Now, climate change is, of course, a global problem that requires global solutions, and you'll be pleased to know that the Bank of England is not alone amongst central banks, globally recognizing the importance of these issues. In fact, we were one of 8 founder members of the Central Bank and Supervisors Network for the Greening of the Financial System, which was established in December 2017 to contribute to the development of climate-related risk management in the financial sector and to support the mainstreaming of green finance and so support the transition to a low-carbon economy. In only 20 months, that network has grown from 8 members to over 40, underlining that these issues are not seen as fringe or niche interests, but as matters of critical importance. Those 40 members of the NGFS cover around about half of global emissions. We supervise 3/4 of the globe's systemically important banks and 2/3 of the globe's systemically important insurers. And we are issuing recommendations covering much the same ground as I've talked about earlier. And so the actions of the NGFS have got the potential to play a significant role in helping the financial system ensure there is an early and orderly transition. So, let me conclude. Climate change, in our view, has the potential to pose significant risks to the financial system. If we're to reduce those risks, we need to act today, because our window for an early and orderly transition to a low-carbon economy is finite and it's closing. To do that, we need a strategic response, one that is holistic, forward-looking, led from the top, requiring actions today that reduce the future risks that we see decades ahead. The need to transition is economy-wide, not just energy. And naturally, you won't be surprised that my focus as a central bank and supervisor is on the risk, but this transition brings enormous opportunities too. The investment needs to finance this transition are significant. There's a substantial opportunity to develop new products and mainstream green finance. It's the real economy that needs to change, but the financial system can work with its clients to understand how they can become resilient to the risks of climate change, and so can support the real economy by accelerating its transition to a zero-carbon world. This is new, it's hard, it's an unprecedented challenge that hasn't been done before, but our work could not be more important. It's not an overstatement to say the future of the planet depends on it, so I'm looking forward to our discussion today as to how we're all going to play our part. Thank you.